Games take time to make. Every community has its own reaction to the wait. But what happens when you test a fanbase's patience? That's when you experience the phenomenon of fandom brainrot. And in its most serious stages, it can look like this.
Maybe I'll be Togor. I'm already Togor. What about Freddy Sammy? I'm already Freddy Sammy.
Deltarune was always notorious for its long waits between each chapter. But it was only after chapter 2 when things took a weird route. It's easy to blame this time period as what shaped the current fanbase's culture, for it not only had the longest wait for any installment, but coincided with the emerging trend of irony-based humor. When a restless fanbase is combined with very little developer interaction, you get the perfect recipe for some of the community's wildest theories, such as Woody Theory, which for the time being would stay buried in the deep cesspools of the Deltarune community. But first, what is fandom brainrot? Is this just a buzzword term I've been throwing around this entire video up to this point? No, it's a term I think best describes a disturbing pattern in online gaming communities across the world. First, let's focus on brainrot. We all know what it is. It's existed on the internet since the early 2000s, and you'll find it nowadays on vertical video format sharing platforms such as TikTok or Instagram Reels. It can be summarized as overstimulating pop culture jargon designed to entertain an audience. If you compare the audience of Deltarune with the type of people the stuff generally appeals to, it makes sense why brainrot has so easily infiltrated the online spheres of Toby Fox's fanbase. But what makes the Deltarune fanbase different from any other game? Shouldn't every other popular indie game community consist of memes like this?
When I'm checking my stuff and I'm sure.
The difference is how starved each audience is for new content. Every game's fanbase develops some form of rot. That's just the nature of the internet. But brainrot isn't just a slow disease which infects discourse. It's more like a domino effect triggered by an external force. And in most cases, it's usually the wait. Remember how I said fandom brainrot is a phenomenon which extends across other online gaming communities? Deltarune isn't unique in this, as other fanbases such as Persona and even Nintendo show similar signs of rot. The difference is how it unfolds in each community, and how Deltarune's version stands out. It isn't just about who the game appeals to, or the type of people which make up the audience. It's also about how desperate fans are for new content. In Deltarune's case, fans were so eager for new content, they began frantically dissecting every crumb of info from Toby. Deltarune isn't unique here. Rot shows up differently depending on the fandom. Take Atlas for example. Persona 5 faced countless delays. When it finally released, it was highly praised by fans. However, as time went on and the initial hype faded, older veteran fans began to notice its shortcomings, especially when compared to the high expectations set by Persona 4. When a community waits that long for a product, expectations naturally become unrealistically high. If the end result deviates too far from what fans loved about earlier entries, there's naturally going to be some backlash. In Persona's case, rot showed up in the discourse itself, with an obsession over the game's dating mechanic, and the running joke that Atlas would continue to milk Persona 5 instead of moving on. The brainrot in this scenario was mostly aggravated not just from the long wait, but also the content of the game itself. Deltarune's case isn't as extreme as Persona's, but the same underlying issues are apparent. A restless fanbase. The longer the wait stretches, the more it overlaps with shifting internet trends, changing the way the community expresses itself. Even though there's nothing inherently flawed about Deltarune's new chapters, rot still arose from the new content. And as we all know, brainrot always has to come from somewhere, and typically, it's from the community's own discourse. Theories are one of the main ways the community of Deltarune can engage with the base material. As after all, speculation about what could happen next in a story is what keeps the fanbase alive and audiences engaged, not only for games, but in general for TV and films. However, as great as theories are at reflecting the current beliefs and values of the current fanbase, they're also great at showing us the severity of fandom brainrot, and how it can overshadow even serious discussion about the game. This is highlighted by one theory which got so badly massacred by the schizophrenic side of the fanbase, it's basically unrecognizable from what it was. The deer in headlights theory, which emerged after chapter 2, attempts to explain what happened to Des, Noelle's missing sister, and what Asgore's deal is. In the theory's infancy, it was mostly perceived as a crackpot theory with very little substance to it, similar to the whole friend inside me ordeal. The earliest post I can find of the theory was in the Deltarune subreddit on November 29, 2023. At this point in time, it wasn't really mainstream at all, and was overshadowed by way more important discourse surrounding chapter 2. The theory only really gained traction after chapters 3 and 4. Fans revisited it when new evidence came to light. The evidence in question being how subservient Asgore is to Carol Holiday, and his strained relationship with Toriel. With how much more prevalent Asgore is within the current chapters and future storyline, It only made sense for fans to revisit the old theory, explaining why Asgore left the police department, but more importantly, what happened to Des. However, in the midst of serious speculation about Asgore, his truck, and the possibility of him harming Des, this meme showed up. First, as a short animated GIF on Twitter, before then receiving an entire song, which I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times by now. Any serious discussion that was to be had about Asgore and Des is completely overshadowed by the meme, and the same happened to the other crackpot theory Friend Inside Me, with its main evidence being loosely held together by a Tumblr shitpost from Toby back in 2019, and the theme of control present throughout the game, before it all came crashing down as Woody rot ruined the seriousness of the theory. Today, brain rot is deeply embedded in the Deltarune community's culture. Although this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just goes to show what happens to a fanbase when they've become restless, and I have a feeling this isn't going to stop anytime soon with the future release of new chapters. Fandom Brainrot is an interesting phenomenon in games, which resonates with the internet's fixation for irony-based humor. It also arises from the obsessive side of gaming culture. Fandom Brainrot isn't necessarily a bad thing, as it reflects how engaged the fandom is in consuming media about their favorite game. However, to an outsider looking in, all of it may understandably look too crazy to want to engage in. If the whole case of Fandom Brainrot amazes you, I guarantee you'll be shocked when you hear the entire story for how Deltarune was conceptualized. It goes way deeper than just being a fever dream Toby thought of, and is a whole rabbit hole in itself. If you want to dive deeper, check out the video on screen.